What's up, everybody? It's Colton. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for tuning in for the fifth and final episode of my guitar collection. I'm all out of guitars now, so we're finishing it off with a double feature of two Telecaster style guitars. So let's get right into it. So as I said earlier, this is episode 5, the last installment that I'm going to be doing on my guitar collection. All the other previous episodes are going to be linked in the description below, so please check those out if you haven't seen them. And if you enjoy this type of content, it really helps me if you subscribe. It helps grow the channel, as well as leave a like, and maybe at the end of the video, leave a comment as to which of these two Telecaster style guitars you prefer. So this guitar is a 2017 Fender American Special Telecaster, done in a limited color. It was like a FSR or factory special run, I think they call it. And it was done for Long & McQuade, which is probably the biggest music retailer we have in Canada. I believe in the States, Chicago Music Exchange also got this color, I think a blue of some sort and a shell pink. I'm not sure if Canada also got all of those, but I know that they had this one, and I just think with the maple fretboard, you know, it really suits this style of guitar very well. This type of guitar is obviously not something most metal guys would gravitate towards, but I really think that the Telecaster is one of the best jack of all trades guitars, and it's sort of the one I reach for when I want to do something maybe outside my comfort zone. So as I said, this is the American Special series. They were sort of the entry point to Fender USA stuff. Very vintage inspired, not a lot of you know, bells and whistles, nothing special really. There's no beveling, you know, it's just complete plank basically. It came stock with the traditional 3-barrel bridge, which I swapped out pretty quickly because it didn't, you couldn't really intonate it properly. And it came stock with Texas Special pickups, which are awesome. Definitely love those pickups. Of course, you'll notice I did change the bridge pickup, but that's just more for the sake of versatility than anything. The original bridge pickup is fantastic. This series of guitars morphed out of the Highway 1 series, which were very, very popular in the early 2000s, as were the American Specials. And the reason being is that they were actually quite financially attainable for a USA Fender. The quality is great. I really like how this one, there's no separate piece of wood for the fingerboard. I understand from a construction standpoint that actually having a separate piece of wood for the fingerboard can actually add strength to the neck, but I think it's kind of cool. It's just sort of a very stripped down look and a very comfortable feel. The headstock is sort of like the 70s Telecasters, and same with the accompanying Strat that came in this series also had a very 70s larger headstock. So yeah, there's not too much to talk about spec-wise with this guitar. It's obviously a pretty stoic design. There's no belly bevel, as I said, and the blocky heel is what it is. The neck profile is obviously a bit thicker than what I'm used to playing, and the radius is quite round, again, compared to what I'm used to playing. As far as modifications go, I've done a fair bit to personalize this guitar and make it work for my needs. Starting up here, I've put on the Graphtec string tree and also a Graphtec nut. This thing stays in tune really well with the help of those things. The straight string pull on the headstock is just a fantastic design. I don't actually have locking tuners. I could put them on there, but it would really just be for string change convenience, not really for tuning stability. There's no problems with the way this is set up. Initially, I changed the bridge to a Goto 6-saddle bridge, which, to be honest with you, I wasn't impressed with for a couple reasons. It was really fidgety. There's no real better word for it. Like, the saddles moved around a lot. And some of the springs that it came with that go over the screws that you use to adjust the intonation like snapped on me. They were kind of brittle, which is a bit weird. And then the set screws that you use to adjust the height of the saddles They were extremely sharp and would, you know, cut me. That being said, this current bridge that's on there is not much better in that regard, but I think that's a pretty common problem, and you can just order shorter screws from various, you know, retailers online. I then swapped it out for a Hipshot compensated 3-barrel bridge, which has been a fantastic addition to this guitar. The combination of the 3 barrels where the 2 strings share one saddle is a really important ingredient in the Telecaster sound, I believe. The brass also helps. I've tried other materials, like I've watched a couple comparison videos, and I've tried other bridges on other Telecasters where they're made of steel or aluminum, and brass just rings the best and gives you that that twang, really. I would say that if you're looking for a more modern Telecaster sound and you don't want to have those sort of pokey harmonics that come with the twangy sound, go for a 6 saddle. But if you like that and you kind of want to add that, you know, mid punch and sort of gristle to to your Telecaster sound, I definitely recommend checking out some kind of compensated 3-barrel brass bridge, because the brass just really lets it sing. This one from Hipshot is great. Fit and finish is fantastic, and there's significantly less play than, you know, the Godot bridge I mentioned earlier. I left the neck pickup as it is, and as I said earlier, that is the Texas Special. That's a fantastic sounding single coil. I don't know what Fender did, but they did it right. It's sort of got everything I want from a single coil sound. It's got that sort of really bluesy mid grind to it, which is really pleasing. But when you put it on a clean channel, it just sounds so bell-like and chimey. I did put in the Chopper T from DiMarzio in the bridge position, and that helped a lot for versatility. This is one of the best single coil sized humbuckers like I've ever tried, bar none. It really sounds like slightly hotter than vintage, like a PAF style pickup. If you can try one of the Richie Kotzen Telecasters, do it, because that will give you a good idea of what you know, this pickup sounds like. Now, the other thing I did is I changed everything to 500K pots. Oh, I shouldn't say I did it. I had a tech do it, and I don't know what he did, but he somehow retained the tonal characteristic of the original pots with the single coil, but allowed some of that brightness to come through on the bridge pickup. I don't know what he did, but this is sort of before I got into modifying my own guitars. This is a few years old now, so I don't know, and I haven't bothered to really look, but it just sounds so great, I don't want to mess with it. There is also a push-pull pot on the volume knob here, which allows me to split this pickup, which is really useful because then I can retain that original middle sound of the single coil here and the single coil here. So yeah, this guitar isn't really what I would reach for if I need to do some serious shredding, but it is fantastic in the way that it's able to bring out other sides of my playing. I did do some session work for a while for like a sort of a pop rock artist, and this really held up no matter what kind of style we were, whether it was a cover or one of his originals. It always delivered, and it was sort of the main guitar I used for that that experience that I had. This also, you know, I can't remember if I already mentioned this or not, but this is really the one I reach for when I need to, you know, come up with a new song idea. I don't know what it is, but just playing this guitar unplugged really helps me get into the writing mood, and a lot of the riffs I come up with start on this guitar. It is also one of the few fixed bridge guitars I have, so, you know, if I need to do a song in drop tuning or standard tuning or whatever, just change the tuning on the fly. It's no big deal with this kind of type of guitar. So when I was younger, I never really cared about vintage guitars. I didn't understand, you know, what all the fuss was about. But the first one that kind of grabbed me was the Telecaster. When I tried one, you know, it just sort of had this totally different sound compared to all the fire-breathing guitars that I had had up to that point. And, you know, as you get older and a little more mature, you want to sort of branch out as a player. And the Telecaster was the one that just worked for me, and I really like how simple and reliable it is. I mean, there's a reason the spec hasn't really changed since the 50s. So fantastic classic guitar. Totally recommend everybody having one in their arsenal, because it sort of allows you to play anything and sound convincing. Let's move on to the Charvel Model 7, which is significantly less traditional. All right, so what we have here is a 1988 Charvel Model 7. This was long before the relationship between Fender and Charvel and Jackson, so they definitely had to use the Jackson-style pointy headstock to avoid any kind of copyright infringement. Lots of companies around this time were producing a Telecaster-style body with a shreddy neck. Kramer had one. Hamer had one, ESP definitely had one, which you can see in the Welcome to the Jungle video, I think, or maybe it's even Sweet Child of Mine, I can't remember. One of the two. Izzy Stradlin had one. This one is from their Japanese range, as pretty much all Charvels were in the 80s, or late 80s anyway. It's got some great specs, and this one is really cool because it sort of gives you that look of the Tele body, but really nothing else about it is Telecaster-like at all. All right, so this thing features the reverse Charvel or Jackson headstock from the 80s. It's got the Model Series logo, which means it's pre-1989, I believe, or maybe 1990, I can't exactly remember, but that's when they transitioned to the toothpaste logo Charvels, which are much larger font, much easier to read in my opinion. This retains sort of the old San Dimas style guitar logo, where the logo kind of literally looks like a guitar, but underneath it, it says by Charvel/Jackson. There's the typical construction, the maple neck with the scarf joint up here. And this has a 22 fret rosewood fingerboard. They also made these with maple, I believe, which are more rare, I think. That being said, this color is pretty rare. You tend to see a lot of them in the Fire Mist burgundy color, and I think they did them in a few others as well. Maybe I'll put them on the screen at this point. This guitar features a basswood body, which is bound around the side, which is pretty cool. And because of the age of this guitar, it's yellowed quite a lot, which I personally really like. It does have a belly bevel, but there is no heel contour. But you know, is what it is. It's also pretty typical for Super Strats of this era to not have, you know, a lot of sculpting over there. That's more something that came into prominence, I'd say, after Ibanez came up with the all-access neck joint, which wouldn't be for a few years. Let's see, what else? It came stock with Goto hardware, Goto bridge, and Goto tuners. I did change the tuners, and I initially changed the bridge, but I actually put it back, and I'll go into that in just a minute. I also changed out the pickups from the stock Jackson single coils to DiMarzios. I've got a fast track in the neck and a super distortion T in the bridge. So you may notice that the single coil sized humbucker here does not have the flange on the bottom, and the routs are very you know, tight to the perimeter of the pickup. That's something that Jackson and Charvel did with a lot of their single coils back in the day, probably just to save space and so that they could only order one, you know, base plate and one bobbin. It does make it a bit of a headache. You have to order them custom from DiMarzio, or, you know, find, for example, certain Seymour Duncan single coil sized humbuckers have no flange, but certain ones don't. And also EMGs, that's very common with EMGs, that they don't have any of that flange. I like the DiMarzio stuff because you can order it in whatever color, and I very narrowly almost ordered pink to make this thing super 80s and also kind of evoke a little bit of the aesthetics of the Paul Gilbert Ibanez model, but I decided to do cream, which matches the binding and the maple of the neck pretty well, so I'm happy with my choice, and it's certainly a bit more classy. So as far as upgrades go, this guitar didn't have locking tuners, so I put Hipshot locking tuners on here, which is a pretty great system because they've got these sort of backing plates that allow you to mount them on just about any guitar without any permanent modification, because you don't have to drill new holes. I think if I got Goto locking tuners, for example, the holes would line up or where the original tuners were drilled in. But this one, you don't need to drill anything because it just mounts with pressure and a lock nut to the backing plate. There's a Graphtec nut on here, which is vastly improved from the original nut. With a headstock like this, especially reverse, you'll notice sort of the angle with which the low string has to break and then go up to the tuner here. It's a good idea to have a well-cut and well-lubricated nut. So the bridge, as I mentioned earlier, I did switch out to a different one, but the original one is made by Godo, and this is the original bridge. I ended up putting it back on for a couple of reasons. I ordered one of those Hipshot replacement bridges with the 6 saddle because generally those are very, very comfortable and they're also very good quality bridges. But for some reason, this guitar has a very thick base plate on the bridge, like quite a bit, like almost twice as thick as a normal Telecaster. That might be to do with how the neck sits in the pocket. In this case, it is a little bit higher than on my other Telecaster there. So they compensated for that by using a larger bridge, or perhaps the other way around. Perhaps because of the larger bridge, they raised the neck. I'm not sure which came first. That being said, this is a really, really good quality bridge and much better than the Godo bridge that I ordered originally for that Seafoam Telecaster. This bridge has very little play in the saddles, the machining's great, and it's heavy and made of brass, which actually sounds fantastic. I will say it totally outperforms the all aluminum modern Hipshot bridge in terms of sonics. That Hipshot bridge is not bad by any means, but definitely doesn't give you any of that sort of traditional Telecaster sound, whereas this actually sounds quite good. So basically the moral of this video is brass is a great material for your bridge. So as I said earlier, this guitar came stock with the Jackson single coil pickups, but what was really weird is that both the bridge and tone pots were 500K, so the guitar is extremely bright. If you go look up any clips of these guitars on YouTube, you'll notice that they all sound really harsh and ice picky. So putting humbuckers in here was a great option. The Fast Track is still pretty low output and gives you a pretty close approximation of a single coil sound, but has a bit more muscle behind it. And the Super Distortion T is, pretty aggressive sounding, which is nice for this guitar. I definitely didn't want this guitar to sound too vintage. It does the 80s thing really well, but I actually have it tuned quite low at the moment, which I'm enjoying playing some, lower tuned songs, and this pickup really delivers on the heavy tones. I also removed the volume pot because it was totally in my way, and took it out and moved it to the tone position pot and deleted the tone altogether. The guitar is now noticeably brighter. I might see about experimenting with maybe a 300K pot or even a 250K pot, which I never installed on this guitar, obviously, because it didn't come with one. That might help rein in some of those higher frequencies. There is quite an interesting snarl. I don't hate it, but it is something that I, kind of want to play around with. And I left the original 3-way position blade here, which is fine. There's probably better quality 3-way blades out there, but this does the job. No weird push pulls or anything fancy. This is just a very basic, bridge, both, neck, Les Paul style switching. As I get older, I just like things that are simple and don't need to do a million sounds. I'd rather just have 3 sounds that are very, very usable. So one of the guitars that really kicked off my interest in Japanese 80s guitars was a Charvel Fusion. It just had the same sort of neck profile as this one, and was just a joy to play. That one had actually a 24 3/4 scale length. This is the normal 25.5. But something about the feel of these necks is just incredible. They're very flat on the back and then sort of a bit wider than, say, the Fender. And obviously the more modern, flatter radius is just really shreddy. They're not Ibanez thin, but they're pretty thin necks. So it really doesn't feel like anything related to a Telecaster once you move past the body and onto the neck. So it doesn't really make you play like the actual Fender does. Like there's no thumb coming over the top here to do chords like I do on that one. This one's very, more of like a speed kind of guitar. I did sell that Fusion back in the day, but I really missed this neck profile. So I really jumped when I saw this one, because these guitars are pretty rare, pretty collectible, and this one's actually in great shape too. So I mentioned him in episode 1, but I got this guitar off of Yuto from NCYO Guitars. I'll leave all his links in the description below, so please check him out. He's a fantastic seller on Reverb who gets guitars from Japan and sells them to the rest of the world. These guitars are kind of hard to come by, and they've been really going up in price. He gave me a really good deal on this one, which I'm very thankful for. And like I said, it's in great shape. There's really no dings on it. The neck is like perfect. There's no dings on the tip of the headstock or anything. There's just a little bit of damage around the back here, but I mean, I can't see it and I don't really care. There's typical play wear like pick scratches and stuff, but nothing that you'd ever see from far away or from how you're seeing it on the camera. I really bought this guitar for the purpose of basically having it be like a bit of a beater. Not to say I'm gonna like thrash it, but I mean, I think it's kind of cool when guitars like this show their age, and I'm not gonna worry like if this has a ding in it or if I bump it on something, because it's already got a little bit of that anyway. And it's been fun to play in lower tunings again. I've had a lot of my guitars kept in standard, E flat, that kind of thing. And so it's nice to have a guitar that's in C sharp standard, and which really allows me to, drop into drop B, or, even tune lower if I want to, or drop it with the Digitech drop pedal. So the tension feels great at 12 to 54. Really love that guitar for this kind of tuning, and it really holds its tuning well and intonates really well. So yeah, can't complain. This is an awesome guitar. Alrighty guys, that's it. I'm all out of guitars, so thanks so much for watching this series. If you missed any of the episodes, please check the links below in the description and you can watch them. I would really appreciate it if you subscribed and leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. We'll see you for more covers going forward, and thanks so much for watching. Take care.